Happy Friday. I couldn't believe it was Friday already. It's like, wow, where did the time go? Hello, Pamela. Mike, I didn't get my good morning from you yet. Breaking tradition, dude. All right, all's good. We got a lot of agenda stuff to talk about today. It's Master the Contract Friday. I think I probably logged 6 hours on the telephone yesterday, just talking about issues. And one in particular, good morning, Kalani, I'm kind of excited about because I don't like when people bully people and just expect to get away with it, right? We have an agent who's got a contract supposed to close yesterday. Big deal. Three something $million. Buyers came in, offered low. We negotiated back and forth. Buyers came back with an acceptable price and a trust verification funds letter of $6 million. Right? 17-day closing. They did home inspections. They got repairs made. They weren't entitled to. The deal's going forward. Right? Sellers are selling this house for $3 million something, buying another house for $4.8 million and put a 10% deposit. Somebody do the math more. What's a 10% deposit on a $4.8 million house? $480,000 deposit. How many of you have the cojones to ask for a $480,000 deposit? It's not enough. Well, they did. No, but it's enough for them. They're going to close this house anyway. They're not going to close on that $3 million house because buyers flaking out, and they're going to refinance another property to get the cash to close this one to save their $480,000. They're going to close on the $4.8 million one. All right. Now, my problem is buyer number one for the $3 million house gave proof of funds, acted as if they're closing, and then before closing said, "Sorry, we can't get the money," and they think they're going to get away with it. And I was involved in the transaction. This is where experience counts. Heidi Seddon in Apollo Beach had a deal that was going south, very similar, not the same dollar amount, it's like an $800,000 or $900,000 house. And the day before closing, the buyer says, "No, we changed our mind. We don't like the mold in the house. We're not closing." Sellers packed up, moved, bought another house. Everything's done. And they just decided, yeah, we're going to be bullies. We're just going to walk away. And normally what happens in that situation? We try to keep their deposit. They don't want us to keep their deposit. They don't sign a cancellation release deposit. And the money just sits there until they figure it out or we split it or something happens and the deal goes out. Well, Heidi seller was not going to have any of that. And I've got to go to my inbox here. And I highlighted it and started down here. Somewhere. Did I not? So their seller went and found an attorney. And this attorney wrote a letter, and it was so good. I'm going to share it with you as soon as I find it. There it is. Okay. So tell me what you would think if you got this letter. Let me share my screen. Basic screen share. Okay. So there is an attorney. His name is Andrew. And so I got this letter. Heidi's seller hired this attorney to write the letter to the buyer. To whom it may concern, please be advised that my firm represents the sellers with respect to the failure of the buyers to purchase the property in Apollo Beach. With a written agreement fully executed on June 11th and set to close on July 31st. While the buyers proposed extended closing up until August 10th, no fully executed written agreement exists allowing for additional time, and thus the closing date remains July 31st, which means the buyers have failed to close on the property in a timely manner. It's a little more threatening when an attorney writes it, right? Buyers unilaterally breached the contract by attempting to improperly rescind the written agreement and cancel the sale on the date of closing. And it references a case. Buyers allege this extreme reaction is justified because they have health concerns after supposedly discovering insignificant microbial growth present around the HVAC unit. Find me an HVAC unit that doesn't have microbial growth around it, and I'll be lying. Survey home inspections prepared a home inspection report on June 14th for the buyer's review to ensure the property was up to their standards. This report very clearly pointed out insignificant microbial growth present around the HVAC unit in writing and via color photographs on pages 17 and 18, comment 4 in figures 4-1 and 4-2, and again on page 40, figures 4.1 and 4-2. Despite having been clearly provided this information twice in the same report, at no time did the buyers ever raise any issues with the property until August 7th, when it was far too late to take any such action. The report also clearly states recommended cleaning with the over-the-counter cleaner to prevent spreading. The perfunctory nature of this language makes it abundantly obvious that the simple wipe down of the HVAC unit will alleviate the issue. Yet buyers would have everyone believe the property is currently uninhabitable. Further, the contract under paragraph 10D of disclosures, mold is a naturally occurring and may cause health risks to damage to property. If the buyer is concerned or desires additional information regarding mold, buyer should contact an appropriate professional. The buyers were even offered options such as UV lights and or mold remediation specialists to inspect the property to allay their fears, and yet the buyers still refused the additional help without explanation. Paragraph 12 of the contract allows the buyers 5 days after the effective date to terminate the contract in writing and with proper notice to the sellers if they consider the property to be unacceptable. The effective date of the contract, as described by paragraph 3B, shall be the date which the buyer and seller has signed or initialed the offer. The effective date was June 11th. Buyers failed to communicate any concerns whatsoever until August 7th, which is well after the original closing date of July 31st. Since the buyers did not exercise their right to terminate the contract, buyer accepts the physical condition of the property and any violation of government, building, environmental, and safety code restrictions or requirements. Emphasis added. Now it gets good. Contract rescission is a remedy reserved for the most serious occasions, such as when title defects cannot be cured, fraud has been committed by a party, force majeure and or material mutual mistake has taken place. None of these are applicable in this instance. Buyers changed their mind after agreeing in writing by fully executing the contract and now want the sellers to suffer the consequences due to the buyer's inability to follow through on a completely fair real estate transaction. Since the buyers are in default under paragraph 15 of the contract, the sellers demand any and all funds due and owing to them, including $10,000 paid by the buyer's good faith deposit, along with the $307,000 from the buyers currently held in escrow by United Title and or its affiliates. If the Florida Real Estate Commission needs to be notified of conflicting demands, Sherlock reserves the right to pursue any and all options available to them up to and including civil litigation. Keep in mind, escrow disputes do not prevent the seller from advertising and or selling the property. The sellers may very well do so if the buyers continue to waste precious time and money disputing this matter. However, damages incurred by the seller will be responsibility of the buyers and only increase exponentially the longer the buyers wait to fulfill the contract terms. These damages include, but are not limited to, the sellers having to perform additional renovations, utility payments, and or maintaining insurance on the property in order to sell the property again. This does not even take into account the attorney's fees and other related legal costs sellers would pursue under paragraph 17 of the contract. Please be advised that this correspondence serves as notice that the sellers will file suit for specific performance immediately if the buyers are unwilling to compensate my clients in accordance with this demand. Since we are pre-suit, there is still time to settle before needless fees and costs are expended on. We look forward to resolving this matter amicably. Yay, fight back people. Guess what that letter did? Guess what the buyers did? They closed. They tried to BS their way out of it, and seller said, I can have an attorney with a really powerful letter. Now, this is Master the Contract Friday. How many of you could have written that letter? That's a case study in itself right there, referencing earnest money deposit due, what it means, how it cannot stop the sale, when the effective date is, quoting it, basically holding their feet to the fire of the contract they signed. Mike, keep watching, brother, because we're going to make sure you can recite these things. No, we're not lawyers, we're going to play lawyers. But anyway, so yesterday I was talking to our agent on this $3 million deal, and these people have the money. The trustee says the money's there. They're just saying they can't get in touch with the trustee, and it's all bullshit. So we hired this attorney to write the nasty letter. And this attorney that says buy the seller is very sophisticated, obviously, a $3.8 million house, right? So they're meeting today. He's going to craft the letter. We're going to hit the demand letter on the buyers, and We'll see if it works. If not, we're putting on notice, and the sellers have to decide if they want to fund a lawsuit. And we talked to the attorney about that yesterday. And the challenge with funding the lawsuit is, are they collectible? You know, people put things in trust for a reason, so they're protected. So we don't know how far we're going to get with it, but we're going to take a stab and we're going to send that letter. Right. So I think it's worth fighting back sometimes when people play stupid games like this. But no, I can't. Well, I am going to fault. This was a pretty clear deal. One problem is we had no earnest money deposit. The trustee said they can't. The trustee said it's too hard to get a deposit. We're closing in 17 days. We're just not going to do one. Okay, that's the only red flag I see that we should have not let happen. Now, what is earnest money? What is a good faith deposit? Is it only money? No. The guy's probably got a Rolex. Put your Rolex down. Give me the title to your Porsche. Give me something that gives me earnest money, good faith deposit on the contract. Because now we got no leverage against these people at all. They've taken a $3.8 million house off the market. They've induced the sellers to buy another house for $4.8 million. They got $480,000 in deposit at risk on that house that they're going to have to go fight to get. All because his buyer didn't follow through on his promises. And part of the reason he didn't follow through on his promises is because we don't have any earnest money that's substantial enough to make them hurt. So that's why we have to understand what goes on. If they cannot present an escrow, then they're not ready. And it's okay to say that. You know, you can flex your muscles and say, no, go get a deposit. We're not accepting your offer without earnest money. I told you the one deal I did last year was a $10 million transaction, and my sellers demanded a $400,000 deposit. The buyers did not want to make a $400,000 deposit. The buyers also all the way along said they wouldn't ask for any extensions. We got to the end of the transaction, and guess what they wanted? An extension. Guess what the seller said? No. Give me your $400,000. And the buyer said, no, all close. And they closed. Now they've owned the property for a year, and we're getting ready to put it back on the market for substantially more money. Right. So the buyer's happy in the end that they closed. Right. So that's master the contract Friday. Number one, get a big deposit to hold your deals together. Number two, sometimes it's worth fighting back. You go to a lawyer and have the lawyer write a nastygram. That's what he called it, a nastygram. Let me send him a nastygram. We'll see where it goes from there. But you got to have some teeth in the nastygram. What was the teeth in that nastygram? We want your $10,000 deposit, and we want your $307,000, which is a down payment for your loan, because we already got it on the escrow. And that's what we want. That's your damages for us. And rather than fight that and spend $100,000 trying to get the $300,000 back, they decided to close on the house because there was a stupid issue of mold around an air conditioning unit. So I just think that was a good outcome. And that was a lot of conversation yesterday. And you now have the benefit of that. So go back to that contractor real quick. Did you understand the words he used? And this is a lot of stuff Chris has been talking about lately. Failure of the buyer to abide by the contract. While the buyer's proposed extended closing up to a written agreement exists, allowing for additional time. There was no fully signed additional agreement. Agents know I'm training from either or neither. No way texting me from either or neither. Where are the words I'm looking for? Buyers unilaterally breach the contract by attempting to improperly rescind. A lot of adverb presuppositions, what they're called in NLP. Adverb presupposition. It presumes the outcome is already done, right? So they improperly rescinded. Okay. Lots of words like that in here, which are there. Quoting the contract, it says buyers should contact an appropriate professional. Yet the buyers still refuse the additional help without explanation. Since the buyers did not exercise the right to terminate, buyer accepts the physical condition of the robbery. He's quoting the contract in many, many different places, which just kind of puts the fear of God in some people that, oh shit, they really got me on this one. None of these are applicable in this instance. He's talking about, you can cancel a contract for some reasons, but not your reasons. And it just goes on and on. Words like immediately, bolded, and underlined. It's just intimidating. So this guy called me back yesterday. I said, dude, you got a powerful pen. I need your help. And we talked about it. I got our agent on the phone. We did a three-way call for about a half hour, and then we put it on the seller, and it's all going down. So Anyway, cool stuff, right? Good. That's number one. We're going to talk about the listing agreement a little bit. That was that story. Oh, I'm going to show you something else. I'm going to share my screen again. This was a good job. I don't know how this works because I'm not an expert at these things, but let's show it. Share my screen. I know this is going to sound funny, but Brian and Nancy have a listing that's been on the market for over 100 days. Crazy, right? No, it's not. They're trying very hard to get it sold. And it's been a lot of counseling back and forth. It's an absolutely gorgeous house. And they've been working very hard with this seller. They've done price reduction after price reduction after price reduction. And then we got involved and we started talking about different ideas and options. And this is the house. It's a beautiful waterfront house on a nice wide location, wide body of water in the background. And the one thing that doesn't seem up to par, in my opinion, was the front elevation. It's an older style home. It's all brick pavers. It's got a little bit of landscaping in here. And that's it. And the rest is a rock yard. But the house is drop dead gorgeous on the inside. The outside pool is beautifully decorated, planted in big trees and greenery. So we talked about doing different things about rather than just lowering the price, because we have houses just like this that are sold nearly the same price or more. And this one just isn't moving for some reason. So we talked about different ideas. And when we started looking around, and this is why I'm talking so much now about before you put a house on the market, get it inspected and get it tested. So it turns out this is a 22-year-old roof. So what do we know about a 22-year-old roof now? It's likely not going to be insurable. So should we fix the roof? No, it's not leaking. What should we do? Get an estimate, get a 4-point inspection, get an estimate of what it would cost to put a new roof on. We could either put a new roof on and raise the price of the house because that was more valuable, or we could just disclose the roof has got integrity and get some insurance quotes of what it's going to cost a new buyer so they don't have to wonder what's going on. So Nancy and Brian did that. And how they did this, I don't know, but somehow in Stellar MLS, I guess it's on showing time, it put a notification out that this house has had a price change. Nice marketing feature. I don't know what that is, what it costs, but somebody should look into that. It's a 3-bedroom, 3-bath house. It's in Apollo Beach, Unit 13. In addition to the support I wanted to see, in addition to the price adjustment, we're scheduling a new roof replacement. Interesting. Now, that should have been done before we put it on the market, but now it's better, right? So I would lower the price and we're putting a roof on. And for any of your buyers who are financing, our seller will do a 2-1 buy down of the interest rate for the buyers with a full price offer for a total of approximately $28,000 in additional savings, right? So Brian and Nancy, congratulations, good job. Good job on negotiating what you negotiated, number one. And good job promoting it to the realtor community to call out the differences, right? Because just that nobody's going to see these things unless it's called out as something else. So we all scan the MLS and just see what's for sale. And little often do we go in and not so often do we go in and read all the realtor remarks, et cetera. Nancy said it's free on showing time. If it's free on showing time, then everybody ought to be doing that. Good. I'm glad you liked the letter. I had a buyer say he would sell his Rolex to get the house instead of $5,000 earnest money. Maybe if he'd offered his Rolex, that might have got the house. There's just different ways, right? It's time to get creative now. We're better than we act sometimes. We'll have to find this feature. Yeah. Nancy, maybe you can share with us. She says it's in showing time and it's free. And maybe we can type in what we can do, how you took advantage of that. Because I thought it was pretty cool. So good job. So price reduction got kicked in, new roof got kicked in, and an interest rate buy down kicked in. So we made the house more attractive and more affordable, right? Good job. Kathleen sent me an article. Kathleen sends me a lot of articles, but this is kind of cool. Start spreading the news. Florida tops New York and home values. So now California, Florida, and then New York, because everybody's leaving New York. Study. Florida leaped past New York to be number 2 in housing values, trailing only California. South Florida is number 5 and Tampa is number 18, made the top 20 most valuable metros list. That's big. So, and that's what happened. I was talking to, I'm going to show you something just because I can. I was talking to Jennifer Zales. Jennifer's the number 1 Coldwell Banker agent in the state, number 5 in the country. And one of the builders that I'm working with, she's working with too. And I wanted to get some insight on what's going on. And she's telling me about the closing she's coming up and doing for this one builder. And they're closing on a $21 million house next week. It's back home. And I'm going, what the hell? We're $21 million houses in Tampa. And she said, well, go to my website and look. So this is her website. Number 1 agent in Florida for Coldwell Banker, number 1 agent in Tampa Bay, and number 5 agent in North America for Coldwell Banker. Pretty good. This house on Adalia is on Davis Island, $15 million closed. This house, $12,350,000 closed. $11,500,000 closed. $12,300,000 closed. Here's a lot for $9 million closed. There's another lot for a $9 million, but that's got a house on it. Look at this place in Avila, $8.3 million. Look at Castle. You know, we don't have these things in most of our markets, but there's a whole world out there. Look at this estate in Odessa for $7.5 million. I was like, holy cow, that's incredible. So that's why Florida is now topping, and these are cheap. Now, if we were in Miami, that $20 million house or $12 million house would be $20 million or $30 million. Crazy stuff. Back. I don't leave that open anymore. Cool beans. So you are in the second most expensive housing market. And one of the things I was talking to that agent about yesterday was, isn't it nice that we all got a raise because their housing prices doubled? And they did. If we have time, I'll play that video again. 2 topics I want to talk about. And you got to be careful about these. So I can take this off screen share now. If you are ever in a situation where the commission changes, let's say you get a 6% listing, but you'll sell it for 5% if you double side it. That's called something. What's it called? Called a variable commission, right? And in fairness to the buyer's agent, because we have to be fair to our buyer's agent because of what? The code of ethics. The code of ethics says we have to treat our fellow agents fairly. So let's say I'm a buyer's agent, and let's say you're a buyer's agent. I'm a listing agent, and I got a buyer, and you're a buyer's agent, you've got a buyer. And the house is $1 million. And I bring in a $1 million offer, and you bring in $1 million offer. Which one nets the seller more? Mine does, because it's only 5% commission instead of 6%, because I double-sided it. So that's called a variable commission, and that puts your buyer at a disadvantage. So I have to disclose that. Now, where do I disclose that? In the MLS. Okay. So you have to be told, and you are told by virtue of being a member of the MLS and having the MLS printout, that your buyer is disadvantaged. And you have the right to ask me what that variable commission is. Because you have to go to your buyer and say, hey, the listing agents, the seller's going to net more with the listing agent's offer because the listing broker is taking less because there's only one broker involved. So that gives your buyer the opportunity to pay more so they could get the house that they wanted to. And that's called a variable commission. And you have to check that box. So if you ever have a listing that says, you know, the commission is different if this happens, you have to disclose it. And if that agent finds out and calls you on it, you have to tell them what the difference is, because you have to be fair to your fellow agent. Okay, so that's called a variable commission, and it's on the MLS profile sheet. And if you do that, you got to check it. It's a violation if you don't. And then similarly, sometimes we get into what's called exclusions. So we say, you know, the seller, you know, in the event that John and Mary Smith buy the house, no commission shall be paid to Century 21. Then why would we do that? Let's say it's a for sale by owner, they got prospects on the hook. We don't think they're really going to close. And to close the deal, we go to the seller and say, look, sign the listing agreement with me, put it on the market. Let me see if I can get you a better offer. And if one of your buyers steps up, I'll walk away. Okay, and then she'll read that in just a second. So I have an exclusion to my listing agreement. And once again, to be fair to my fellow agent, I need to disclose that. Say there's exclusions in this listing. So if, let's say I'm the buyer's agent, not the listing agent, and I see that there's exclusion, I call the listing agent and say, hey, who's excluded from this agreement? They have to tell me, because what if I'm working with John and Mary Smith? Then I'm going to assume a commission's there. I've been disclosed that it has been excluded, but I'm not aware of it. So you got to read these remarks, especially. So exclusions and variable commissions were two things I wanted to talk about today. And that was cool. What did Nancy say? To do a notification, go into showing time, listing activity report, select the listing from listing setup, then listing activity, send notification and price adjustment. You can either send out a canned version that it creates or type in your own version, which I did because we had several incentives. I just learned how to do it, and there's a video on showing time to show you. I hope I didn't leave out any step, but it's super easy. And you can select who it goes to as well, including every agent who has shown your listing plus others. Hope this helps. That helps a lot. Thank you very much. Lauren says that's be done on the computer. You can't do it on your phone. Some things are still like that. Nice. Thank you for sharing. That was a nice touch. Okay. So variable commissions, exclusions. Okay, this is just me choosing to be a lover, not a fighter. I got a call from we can talk about angry HOAs. My HOA general election was 2 nights ago, and most of our amendments passed, and that's what we wanted, so it was all good. But one of my guys I run into in the mornings on my walk is on the board. Well, he's on the grievance committee. So, and he's just aggravated at all this stupid stuff that goes on. So anyway, HOAs are resident managed HOAs are sometimes unfair because it's just angry people that get on a board that have no power in their real life and they want to take it out on everybody else. So we have this situation. One of our agents got a listing. It's in an HOA, and the HOA president is has been a real estate broker for 45 years. And of course, he hasn't sold a house in 30 years, but he's got all the experience of a 45-year real estate broker. So to make it easier for him, he decided as the association president to write up his own rules and printed it out and emailed it to the listing agents, please disclose this in your listing. And our agent's like, why? It's already in the condo association disclosure. My sellers already disclosed all this. Well, this guy got bent out of shape. Yes, I am preaching. This guy got bent out of shape and called me. And I called the agent and I said, look, the guy's crotchety. This association has to give approval for the resident to be approved to move into the neighborhood. If you start picking a fight with this guy now and pushing his buttons, are you going to make it easier or harder on your buyer to get approved? It's probably going to be harder to get him approved because the guy's got a grudge against him now. And I said, what's the big deal? Just take the attachment, send it to listings at c21be.com, and they'll add it to the attachments MLS. So to make the guy happy, I did call back, I emailed him back because he emailed me to call him. So that's what he likes. He likes to talk. He doesn't like to email, which is fine. I'm the same way. So I sent him an email back, said, I talked to the agent, it'll be up shortly. And it was done. So my comment here is fight or bend. What's easier and what's going to be easier for you long term? Sometimes we argue to be right rather than to be dead right, because we're going to make it harder for ourselves to do that. Okay, I know you guys love getting emails from my dad, so I'm going to share one of his emails. Cool. You guys can debate that amongst yourselves. Okay. Let's move around here. Okay, so my dad, I love this, but it's really kind of a good message. It's just hard to read because you got to turn your head sideways, and I don't know how to rotate it when it's inside a text message. So I don't know if anybody took the time to do it, but this is kind of a summary of what we teach, right? And I don't even know what magazine this was. It's Florida Realtor Magazine, October issue. Inventory is tight. That's why it's so important to have a plan when competing for a listing. So 10 steps to do this. And we're going to do a listening agreement in a minute. Listen carefully. I'm not going to read all this to you, right? Do you get it? What do we say about listen carefully? Go into neutral and listen to what they say and to paraphrase them. If they talk about a gourmet kitchen, you talk about a gourmet kitchen. If they talk about cathedral ceilings, you don't talk about high ceilings, you talk about cathedral ceilings, right? Play back the words they like. So this is all part of the building rapport stage of making them like and want to do business with you. Number 2, ask the right questions. How do we teach to stay on track with asking the right questions? Follow our listing presentation script. It's really simple. What is it? It's a series of questions that are the right questions to ask. Lay down my side here. Number 3, adapt your approach to match the seller's personality style. Wow, maybe we're not crazy about teaching this DISC stuff. Number 4, use assumptive language. Those are those adverb presuppositions I was just talking about. Obviously, when you list with me, you'll be pleased with the outcome. Things like that, using assumptive language. Once we get your home sold, it's going to be much easier to get you to your new place in Tennessee, right? Assuming these things are going to happen. Use assumptive language. Number 5, the marketing begins at the curb. How many times did I talk about that? How do we recommend you pull up to a house? Do you pull into the driveway and park in front of the garage door, or do you park across the street and walk across the street and looking at the whole house? Brian and Nancy's house was an interesting example because I saw the house by boat. I took the boat out, I pulled in the backyard by their dock, and I walked into the pool, which is a great way to show a house, by the way, because that's how they're going to do it. And I never went outside and looked at the elevation. And I talked to some agents about it afterwards. And they said, yeah, it's just so boring on the front because there's nothing boring anywhere else in the house, but the front is boring. So number 5, the marketing begins to the curb. So take that step yourself and have these conversations. And don't pull a punch, tell them the truth. Number 6, during the home tour, take notes and ask questions. If you look at Brian and Nancy's listing paperwork, on the attachments to the MLS is a 2-page flyer with all of the updates that have been done. I mean, they changed every outlet, they changed every light switch, they changed everything was done. And it's all meticulously documented because of the notes they took, because the seller's very proud of the work they did. So we're going to show it off. Number 7, discuss pricing strategies with the seller. We got to get more into this because we've gotten away from it. We have something that we haven't talked about in a while. I'll get Jeff to do it with me one day, probably next week. Next week we're away. We have the seller's cost estimator, and it kind of forces you to have the discussion of this price is going to take longer. A house sold at market price sells at market time. If you want to sell faster than market time, you got to be lower than market price. If you're willing to wait longer, you can try to get more. Operative word, try, right? So that's a strategy. So using the cost estimators, we show them here. At $1 million, you're going to get this. At $1,050,000, you're going to get this. At $1.1 million, you're going to get net this. This is slow. This is faster. This is slower. Where would you like to be in the spectrum? And that's a strategy, right? And it takes time to figure these things out. But it puts them in control. So this way, it's never you picking the price. Number 8, reframe what work needs to be done on the house to sell. There it is, guys. This is my hot button for the fourth quarter. It was such tight inventory right now. You heard from our mastermind on Monday that we had 3 listings, I think, that were brought up. All 3 were put on the market on Friday. All 3 got multiple offers over the weekend, and all 3 were sold by Monday. That's pretty damn impressive, right? So what does that mean? I would say the agents did a really good job discussing pricing strategies with the sellers. They probably did a really good job coaching the sellers on how to make the house presentable and look good. They probably, now I hope, they probably did the 4-point inspection to make sure there's no major problems. And if they didn't, the buyers are going to do an inspection, they're going to identify the problems, and the propensity for the contract to cancel goes up. And we don't want that to happen either. So reframe what work needs to be done to make it sell. And with the insurance, I'll use the word crisis, insurance crisis that we're having, it's going to be a problem. If the water heater's old, if the roof is old, if the HVAC is old, if the water heater's old, all those things are going to be insurance problems coming up. So at least disclose them and know what it's going to cost. Number 9, bring the listing agreement to the appointment. We go one step better. Now you got a Moxie appointment presentation that has all the sample paperwork in it, so they can review and you have to spend your time going over it, which I think is great. Explain how you market and communicate. Spend 15 to 20 minutes. We do it in 6 minutes because we have a marketing presentation video that hopefully you're sending in your Moxie presentation to make you look better than the competition you're competing with. So they can watch the video, and Jeff does a very good job. I'm getting ready to redo it. Angelique sent me the script, so we're going to update that. And we'll re-record that and update the video as well. So that's all coming because we want you to compete for these listings and win them. So I hope you take confidence that everything that this article says, we teach. And we've got a process and a program for. So maybe we should all start doing the same things, right? And get on the back and win more often. Okay. We're going to talk about now occupied listings. It's fun to be me because I get the same problems over and over again, and I pretty much give you the same answer all the time. So I figured if I give you the answers ahead of time, you won't have to ask them all the time. So an occupied listing. What does a lease give a tenant the right to? The answer is quiet enjoyment. It's actually a right in the lease. The tenant shall have quiet enjoyment. There's also a clause in the lease that says the seller has access, but they have to give proper notice, right? Now, the question is, what's proper notice? So we've got a seller who's got 3 properties, like a triplex. 2 of the units are easy to show. There's an occupied tenant in one of them, and the tenant just put his foot down and said, I'm not showing it. Now, that's a problem, right? Because what does the buyer want to do? They want to see all 3 units. And this guy's saying, nope, I'm not letting you in. Right in his lease, it says, seller has the right to access for emergency work, for repairs and things like that, but not to interrupt their quiet enjoyment. So turns out this lease is on, it's what they call it? It's at sufferance. It's expired. So he automatically reverts to month-to-month leases. So this guy's being a jerk. We need him out. And how does that seller get rid of him? He just put on notice, I'm not renewing your lease, get out. But what if the guy doesn't get out? Then you got to call a lawyer. I know you hate it when I tell you you got to call a lawyer, but that's what lawyers do. They do law work. We're not lawyers. We don't do law work. So write this down. There's a website called evict.com. And it's very, very, very informative. And the landlord-tenant laws just changed. Don't quote me on it, but I think it's a 30-day lease tenancy. You have to give them at least 15 days notice to move out. So this guy should go to evict.com. It's Anthony Heist and his son now, but he bought the website domain evict.com, and he's been doing evictions for us for decades. Oh, sorry, my fountain just turned on. Been doing evictions for us for decades. It's super easy. It's what he does. It's very inexpensive, and he does it right. Because if you don't do proper notification, then you got to give him another month, and you just keep debating this, pushing this problem down the road. So spend the 75 or $150 to get the eviction properly drafted. Probably all done online now. I haven't done it in a long time, but that's that firm, evict.com. The seller goes to them, forces the eviction, get the guy out of the house, and that. Or before we put it on the market, say, seller, we really need these units empty, because unless the tenant is going to be super agreeable. And how do you find that out? Ask them up front. Hey, we're going to be putting these units on the market, so you're going to have to either move, or maybe the new owner will let you stay. I don't know, but we count on your help letting us access this property for showings. Most people will say, yes, just give me notice and I'll make it ready. This guy's like, no, we got all my personal belongings in here. I'm not ready. And he's just being a jerk. So we got to get rid of him. So that's an owner occupied listing, and or not owner, occupied rental listing. A tenant and an occupied, a tenant occupied listing for sale is a challenge. So do your best to get the tenants out, which will test the seller's ability to be how serious they are, because they want the parental income, but they want it sold. And sometimes you don't get to have both at the same time. Kimberly, I take notes of the listing appointment with the seller showing me their home, and be sure to use that. That's exactly right. Yeah. Okay. Back to my inbox again. Where- Iceberg. I forgot who sent me this, but it came to me by text. This would be a good post for you on Facebook or something. Real estate is like an iceberg. What the buyer sees, their dream house, we see a commission, we see a closing, we see success. What we don't see the negotiations that go on behind the scenes of dumb tenant who won't let us show the properties, the hassles of showing and timing the showings and doing all that, the market research that goes into having the expertise to give the knowledge to a consumer so they can make an educated decision. The inspections before, during, and after the sale, or before listing it and after it sells, the appropriate disclosures that are required to be had, which everything's written in the contract, which is we have to know what it says, the licensing that it has to have, licensing that has to happen. Oh, by the way, September 30th was tomorrow. If you don't have your license renewed and your education done, you're going to be kicked out of the board, and everything else. And to get reinstated is going to cost like an extra $150. So your 14 hours continuing education has to be done, and you have to go to the DBPR, pay the fee for your annual license renewal, and admit and prove that you took the education, or at least attest that you have. Both things have to be done. You have to do the education and update it on the DBPR site, and you have to do it by tomorrow, right? So that's your licensing part, and pay your taxes and dues, and you guys get your bills on that. All the marketing that has to happen for these things to happen, contracts and laws, all the meetings have to happen, Zoom or otherwise, and contracts not that happen that don't actually close, right? So it's just a little thing that I thought was kind of nice to talk about. I think a good story, because that's the next thing I'm going to talk about. Is this is an example. What I want you to do, what we want you to do, what my Puma wants you to do, is to have content that posts that makes you sound smart, right? So you could post this and you could do a video talk over it and say, you know, everybody thinks real estate is real easy, but let me tell you the problems that can happen here. And this is a video that Chris played on Wednesday. So some of you might have seen it. It's 4 minutes long, so I'm gonna play it. But the guy's boring as all get out, but the message is super good, right? And it just says, hey, look, I'd like to earn your business. Let's talk about it. So give me a second here and we'll take a look at that. And my question is, just like I said, could you write that letter, the legal letter, and make it sound that strong, meaning you know the contract that well? Second two is, can you talk about what's going on in the market the way we're talking about it today, and the way that this guy's going to do it right here?
Did you guys see the news?
Am I sharing?
20-year all time.
Sorry. Share screen again.
And highest interest rates ever. The
A
average
little more enthusiasm, dude.
for a good credit borrower right now is over 8%. Now you'll see a ton of headlines about this and markets crashing, all that stuff. I'm a big data guy, so let me share the data with you on what's really going on. So this could all be really categorized as like a post-COVID whiplash, right? We had a global pandemic. The US economy responded by artificially reducing interest rates to basically keep things moving forward. Now, the consequence for that was rampant inflation. And so to combat that, they did the opposite thing, artificially raised rates in order to bring inflation down. And we're finally holding steady at about a 10% inflation rate. And so you might be thinking, well, interest rates are at all-time high, inflation is at a pretty record high, so obviously home prices are going down because it's so much expensive. Well, you'd be wrong. You're not seeing a significant value reduction across any major metropolitan market. In fact, see the opposite. Which of course may beg the question, why? If it's so unaffordable, why are the prices going down? Make them more affordable so that we can buy homes. And it's very simple, supply and demand. Our supply is also at record lows, yet the demand is actually at record highs. So we have the largest number of buyers ever, pre-qualified or doing no more new mortgage inquiries, ready to enter the market. So a lot of these folks are saying, well, I'll wait for interest rates to go down, my payment will be lower, and therefore I can then move into homeownership and I'll feel a little bit more comfortable about it. But here's the issue there, when interest rates go down, that low supply we have, still an issue. I popped you up here so I can use my hands. So, record number of buyers, pre-qualified, ready to enter the market, record number. Record low inventory of homes for sale across every major metropolitan area. If interest rates drop significantly, so right now they're about 8, let's say it drops to 6%, a 2-point drop is huge. More buyers enter the market. You're going to have a tidal wave of buyers crashing on to the low inventory of availability. And yes, some people will sell their home when interest rates are lower because now they've kind of unlocked their equity. They feel like they can go buy, but it's not going to offset this tidal wave of buyers. So unfortunately, it's a little bit of a rock and a hard place, because if you want to wait for interest rates, your competition with other buyers is going to be skyrocketing. Maybe not full COVID swing 40 offers on every house, but certainly some competition compared to right now. If you enter the market, 70% of the homes in both the markets that I work at are being sold with a significant amount of seller concessions and for below list price. So just an example, $400,000 property, we're buying it at 380, 390. We're getting 10, 20 grand in concessions for credit, and we're getting plenty of repairs. If you end up with 5 other people competing on that same home because interest rates are 6%, we're not getting concessions, we're probably paying over this price, and we're definitely not getting more of the repair stuff. So is it the right time for everybody to buy a home? No, and it never will be. Is it a bad time for everybody to buy a home? No, and it never will be. As with all things in real estate, and if you've been following me for a while, you might preach this over and over. Real estate is not a one-size-fits-all industry. It is very nuanced, it is very complex. Your specific situation, priorities, goals, and finance plans will shape any kind of a strategy that we would put together for you. But I will say this, don't stop having conversations, whether that's with a trusted advisor that you know in the industry, or whether that's with me. I'd love to have a conversation with you and just be able to paint a better picture for what does this mean to me specifically, Nick. Please treat me as a resource where you have more chat about it. Hopefully that's helpful, gives you a little more data to understand these crazy headlines that you're seeing.
Okay, great message. Not the greatest delivery. He's in his car. He's got sunglasses on the entire time. It's no energy in the speech, but forget all that. The guy's got 6,500 followers and he's giving out real estate advice, and the advice he's given is solid, right? You guys, I want you to be able to articulate. And if you just did this in a video and talked about, we just did it with our podcast this week, which I'll send out when Taylor sends it to me. It's true. When interest rates drop, there's a whole bunch of buyers that are going to get out and pounce, right? And do you notice what he said? He said rates are now at 8, and if we get a major drop to 6, now all of a sudden 6 is a great rate. 6 was a bad rate 6 months ago because it wasn't 4, right? But now it's going to go to 8. If it drops to 6, that's going to be a major drop, and then buyers are going to come crawling out of the woodwork. And there's no significant way that we're going to get a lot more inventory on the market other than new home construction, because most sellers are not in a position to sell now unless they have to. So that's the point. And the people that are waiting on the sidelines for rates to fall so they can buy, his example was great. It's a $400,000 house. You can right now offer 385, get some concessions, and win the bid. And they'll make some repairs and maybe buy down your rate or something. But if there's a whole bunch of buyers unloading, that he called a tidal wave of buyers, they're going to overbid, and you're going to end up paying more. So now you pay $400,000 for the house, you get a lower rate, but you get no concessions. So you're going to pay a lower rate on a higher purchase price and get no deals, or you can pay a higher interest rate on a lower price and get concessions, which is better. Do the math. So that's kind of what I want you guys to start thinking about for your answers to talk to sellers or buyers about why now is a good time to buy, because that's a really true statement. So Last thing I was going to do is show you the listing agreement because I want to make sure we're just keeping this stuff top of mind because it's important. I told you I talked to 2 agents yesterday that don't work for us. One was Danya Perry, the #1 Century 21 agent in the world, and one is Jennifer Zales, the number one Coldwell Banker agent in the world, or #5 in the U.S. And we were talking about the market and the changes, and I'm talking about them. Listing these $12 million houses, guess what commissions are charging? Yep, 6%. So once in a while, we'll do a 5, but pretty much we get 6% all the time on $12 million houses. Figure out the commission on that one. I'm signing into my sites and I'll share my screen. Boom. Yes, it's me. Okay. Templates. Ah, come on, Craig. I just did this the other day too. All documents. Listing agreement, got it. Okay. I don't know the answer to this, and the more I think about it, the more I'm not worried about it. But we have a serious issue coming upon us, and we're going to learn more next week. You'll learn it at Top Agent. We'll learn it at Leadership. And it's this NAR lawsuit with the Department of Justice. And the whole issue is really saying that paragraph 8 of our listing agreement, that we're misleading buyers by telling them our service is free. So we agreed, NAR agreed about a year ago that we would stop using the term that our services are free, because you could argue that the buyer is really paying more for the house than they would have to if the seller didn't have to pay their commission. Although, as you think it through, as much as I'm thinking this through, most buyers are cash strapped. They don't have a lot of cash to make their down payments. So if they had to pay the real estate broker's commission out of pocket, they wouldn't be able to buy a house because they wouldn't have enough money down. So what the natural response to that would be is for the buyer to request that the seller pay their agent. So that's really what's happening. It's just it's become standard that it's just become commonplace that the seller pays the buyer's agent's commission, right? So what we do is we charge 6% and the seller pays us 6%. And then what we do with our 6% is our business. If we choose to put it on the MLS, we spend money on the MLS. If we choose to put photographs, we choose to put photographs. If we choose to put landscaping and yard signs, we put landscaping and yard signs. If we choose to pay part of our commission to a buyer's broker and our seller's best interest, we can do that. So I think that's where this is all going to shake out. But I just wanted to point out that this is the only thing different in our listing agreement from everybody else's, is that we kind of demonstrate to the seller that, look, you're going to charge you 6%, but we're only going to get 3%. And we're going to use the other 3% of your money that you're paying us to cooperate with another broker. And you can choose right here. Would you want to pay me 3%, 3.5%, 4%, 5%? Now, the MLS is probably going to have to change because right now, the MLS is a universal offer of compensation and it requires compensation. Now, they changed part of the rules a while ago and you can make compensation as low as $1, but now it's going to be as low as $0. So you're going to get some smart ass sellers who's going to think, well, I don't have to pay a commission to the buyer's agent anymore. No, you don't. But you're also not going to have the buyer's agent showing your listing. So you got to decide. Now we can't discriminate and not show a house. So that's going to be another issue we're going to have to work with. So pay attention to the news as this pops through. The hearing is on October 16th. And if it goes to If it gets resolved, then it'll probably take a year or so to figure out what the changes are going to be, because it's a negotiated settlement. And just know that it's coming down the pike, and we'll teach you more as we learn more. So that's all I got for you today. And you're doing a great job. I love seeing the hot sheet. One day this will get 19 contracts in the day. It's pretty strong. Yeah, John, I think they should do what we do too. There you go. All right, any questions for the greater good today? One new message. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. Happy Friday, guys. Be safe. Take a break this weekend if you need it. If you don't need it, get to work. Make some conversations so you can report the successes on Monday. Start thinking now. Plan ahead to report your successes for Monday. Let's have a fun time on Monday. All right. Thank you. Happy Friday. We're around if you need us.